what an honour it is to be invited to address a room filled with both the city's future leaders and the incredible support teams that are here to present them tonight. In truth, I'm in absolute awe of everyone in this room tonight. In my previous profession as an Army officer, I had the great privilege of presenting the Long-Term Leadership Award on behalf of the ADF to local high schools for the better part of the last decade, and it truly was one of my favourite duties. Watching young student leaders MC those awards nights, and let's be honest, more often than not clean up at them, I always left those events inspired, invigorated and reminded of just how much one person can achieve if they believe in themselves and have a strong support network. So to be asked to be your keynote speaker here tonight is absolutely a privilege. So upon listening to my brief biography introduction, you may be mistaken into thinking that I was the type of student that had it all together with a clear vision and outline for my future and career. Unfortunately, nothing could be further from the truth. My senior schooling years were marred by what we'll call late puberty, but was probably more just a terrible attitude. My one saving grace, though, was that I was open to the idea of just being flexible and leaning into some life experience and seeing where it might take me. It has been that same flexibility and openness that has led me on an incredibly rewarding career path. And after 20-ish years of post-school life experience, I've come to the conclusion that knowing what you want to do matters far less than knowing who you are and what matters most to you. So for me, that journey of self-awareness was aided in part by my love for physical challenges and adventure. That ultimately led to an impromptu, if not a little bit underthought, enlistment in the Australian Army, but it ended up being a really rewarding career path. And I really enjoyed my career, but that's not to say it was all sunshine and rainbows. It wasn't. There was times where it was really hard and confronting, and there were many, many tears. Following what you love doing doesn't mean that you are not going to experience sufferance. In fact, anything worth doing is never easy. But investing into a career that allows you to get paid to do the things that you love is an investment worth every single moment of hardship. And so I reflect on this period of my service. I missed every birthday from the age of 18 through to about 25. I'm born in June. June's when Army hosts all of its major exercises, so I was always outfield, without water, without power, sleeping in the dirt somewhere and without fresh food. I think that is an image of my 21st birthday cake, and at the time I just desperately wanted to be home. But I look back on those birthdays now as some of my favourite, because I know that they built in me the resilience that I have today and have made me so incredibly grateful for the simplest pleasures that I enjoy. So as I progressed through my career and through the ranks, I was privileged to be able to receive some of the best leadership and self-development training available, and I have attended countless adventure training and resilience building activities where the aim of instructors is to push you ever so gently outside of your own comfort zone. Get comfortable being uncomfortable was the mantra. And whilst I'll still resolve that that is an oxymoron, I have certainly become fond of the ideal that we can seek to develop a level of self-resilience and self-protection against those things that might challenge or unseat us. And so at the age of 22, I decided that I was going to really lean into this ideal of getting comfortable being uncomfortable, and I entered an Ironman triathlon. So for those of you not aware of this event, it's a grueling endurance event that originated in Hawaii, and it combines a 3.8 kilometre swim with a 180 kilometre bike ride and culminates in a 42 kilometre marathon run. Now, I wasn't an athlete at this stage, so I had a sticker made up for my bike, and it read, "You can think you can, or either way, you will be right. And I had that affirmation in my field of vision for the whole 7.5 hours I was on my bike, and in my head for the 13 hours and 16 minutes it took me to complete that event. It has been an affirmation that has followed me through my life and was particularly useful when in my late 20s, as a newly promoted sergeant, military instructor and mother of 2 baby boys, I decided that I wanted to go to university to study a Bachelor of Education. So I loved my career as a medic, but I'd made the decision that I couldn't be both the medic and the mother that I wanted to be, and I wasn't prepared to compromise on either. And so I did a lot of personal reflection about what it is that I loved about my service, and I decided that commissioning as an Education Corps officer, where I could contribute to the training system that had provided so much to me throughout my career, was the best way I could serve both my country and my family. So raising babies, studying part-time, working full-time, it wasn't easy. But I was so grateful for the opportunity that I really lent in to every experience it provided, and I was lucky enough to be accepted into the Griffith Honours College. And that proved to be another critical juncture in my life where I had this opportunity to work with and learn alongside some of the most exceptional high achievers on the Gold Coast. And I remember I was struck not by their capability, but by their capacity to achieve excellence across multiple lines of effort. And they were able to achieve that because they knew what it is that mattered to them. And a really important part of that program was taking time out to really think about your values and your core beliefs, and to make sure that the direction you're taking aligns with them. And that has been a life lesson that I've carried throughout my career, and was particularly useful when an unexpected opportunity arose to represent my lifelong local community. It did feel almost fateful, but just as I didn't know whether I could complete an Ironman when I started, I certainly didn't know if I had what it takes to cut it as a councillor. Becoming a politician and vulnerable to the criticism and condemnation of the public was just about as far from my comfort zone as I ever cared to imagine. But not one to shy away from discomfort, I ultimately did not let the fear deter me, and lucky for me, it wasn't long before I got to face my deepest fears head on. So early in the evening of the 25th of December 23, I was very excited to be at the metaphorical finish line of what had been an incredibly challenging year full of change and adjustment, not just for myself, but for my entire family, when an unexpected storm ripped through southeast Queensland, decimating large portions of our local area and plunging my entire division into blackness. Now, I knew that the event had been significant, and I knew that council would have a long road ahead of us. I also knew as the local area representative, people would be looking for me for guidance and advice. But when I woke up on Boxing Day, I was without power, I had no phone reception, and our family car was trapped beneath the rubble of our once carport. There was not a lot of information available in those early days, except that the event had been significant and that we had over 100,000 homes across southeast Queensland without power. So as a family, we got out in the streets and we connected with as many neighbours and community members as we could. But in an electorate of approximately 40,000, the challenge of connecting all those that had been disconnected was an insurmountable task. An electrician friend once told me, "You ain't seen nothing till you've seen man without power." I now understood the full wisdom of that wise caution. And as reception began to improve, the vitriol on Facebook ensued. Now, I've never been a particular fan of social media. I don't like what a thin veil of anonymity and perceived physical distance does to a person's judgment and inhibitions. So I certainly didn't go looking for negative commentary over those periods, but when you go out in the street and virtual strangers are hugging you saying, please don't listen to what they're saying, they're just really angry, you know you've probably got some problems out there. Despite the backlash, I am proud to say that I faced every negative comment head on. When people said I needed to be more present, I didn't seek to argue about where I'd been and what I'd done that day. I simply said, where can I meet you? When I set up a town hall in our most affected suburb, I was yelled at and screamed at in the street for issues that were outside of my control and influence, most of which didn't even sit within my level of government, much less mine. And it sucked, and it hurt, and it felt incredibly unfair. After all, I had been similarly affected myself, but I knew that the only alternative was to turn away from the problem, and I knew that I was stronger than that. And I look back at images from this immediate recovery phase, and I noticed that I was wearing my Ironman finishers hat in almost every one of the events that I attended. And I think at the time I thought I was doing it to cover the fact that I hadn't showered properly in days. But on reflection, I probably did it as a subtle show of strength. Now, one of the most contentious decisions that I made during this period was to not cancel the Paradise Point New Year's Eve celebrations. So at this stage, we still had approximately 2,000 residences without power, including small pockets of Paradise Point itself. So I received the following email from a particularly enraged resident. Councillor, spelt like the psychology type, but we'll come back to that. Councillor, I'm writing to express mine and my 87-year-old mother's absolute disgust at the New Year's Eve fireworks still going ahead, 2 exclamation points. Energex still haven't restored power in our street. Fireworks are the last capitals thing anyone wants. Maybe the people who are mindless and don't care for others, but how you cannot see this is the most disrespectful thing to do is beyond me. My mother will be making an appointment to see you in the new year. She said she's never felt more betrayed by an elected official. Sickening. So I was going to point out the fact that I'd been appointed and I wasn't elected, but I felt a debate in lexical semantics wasn't going to aid me at any stage during this particular argument. But I did hone in on a few other points raised by this lady. So Mum's 87 years old, and I did a quick maths on that. That places her born in approximately 1938. This is a woman that was alive during Hitler's reign, and yet had never been more sickened or disgusted than an elected official. So I wasn't going to bring global politics into it, but I did feel like it was a rather harsh declaration on her behalf. And I can laugh about it now, but at the time, it certainly wasn't the only email, and there was plenty of commentary coming through Facebook as well. And luckily, I know who I am, and I know I'm not mindless, and I know I'm not disrespectful. And yet here I was, for the first time in my life, having to defend myself against these types of accusations. And I remember thinking, how have I got myself into this position? And this was possibly the most significant leadership learning of my career so far. A privilege and a burden of leadership is that we have a responsibility to look beyond ourselves, to look beyond the immediate context and take in all of the relevant factors that will ultimately underpin our decision making. Other people don't have that responsibility. They get to look through their one set of lenses in their living rooms where right and wrong is often black and white. Now I knew we still had residents without power and in no mood for celebrating. I knew that because I'd been out there every day and because I was one of them. But I also knew that we couldn't have the event refunded, that the resources could not be reallocated to storm recovery tasks, and so there was no practical benefit to become of cancelling the event, and so it came down to a question of sensitivity. Now, I'm an immensely empathetic person, and the last thing I would ever want to do is offend anybody. But I also had the foresight of knowing that this was an event enjoyed by thousands of Gold Coast residents every year. I knew that we had local businesses that had suffered terribly during what should have been their most critical trade period. And then I also knew that we had plenty of families in the division that were crying out and looking forward to something to celebrate during what had been a very ordinary Christmas to New Year's break. And so I made a decision on behalf of all those that sought to benefit from it. And because it aligned with my values and my core beliefs, I knew that if it came at the expense of my own reputation, I could give it over willingly and with the greatest of pride. So as you embark on your leadership journeys this year, take time to regularly reflect on what your values are and your core beliefs, because when you face the inevitable criticism that comes with leadership, you'll have a strong moral compass to guide you. That's not to say you need to be fixed in your views. I'd actively discourage you from doing so. Keeping an open mind and a flexible approach will allow you to identify pathways that others might not see. For me, that's how I found myself in this role. I've always known I wanted to be of service, but that aspiration has never been fixed to a single role. So whether it's been as an army medic, as an education corps officer, as a teacher, as a foster carer, as a parent, or as a counsellor, it's never really mattered. And I circle back to what I said at the start. Knowing what you want to do matters far less than knowing who you are and what matters most to you. As it stands, today marked the last day for candidates to nominate for the local government elections in March. And so it would seem, quite historically, if not a little humorously, I am the only City of Gold Coast councillor left standing unopposed. And will by default become the city's first full-term councillor, having never received a single vote from my community. My entry into this political sphere is something that Stephen Bradbury himself would be proud of. And in the same spirit of Mr. Bradbury, I'm going to coin his once famous retort to the naysayers. I don't think I'll take this medal for the 1.5 minutes of race I actually won. I'll take it for the decade of hard slog I put in. So my call to action for you tonight, put in the slog now, lean into the discomfort and know your values. But most importantly, above all else, enjoy the ride. Leadership is a privilege. Enjoy where it takes you and don't sweat the small stuff. And if you're ever in doubt, it's all small stuff. Before I leave tonight, I do need to shoot away a little early because there is a Meet the Candidates event in my area that might be just like the Griffith Honours College was for me, I cannot understate the importance of nights like tonight. This networking experience can't be bought and its value can't be oversold. Take the time to meet with your peers, exchange phone numbers and set up group chats. None of us are as smart as all of us. So on the screen now, they are my contact details in QR form. As I said at the start, I am in awe of every one of you here tonight, and it would be my privilege to be considered part of your network, and I would love to in any way contribute to your leadership journeys this year. Enjoy the rest of your night and look after yourselves and each other.